So this video is all about how to lead a talk or a discussion or a short thought with children and young people. So that moment comes when the youth leader or the children's leader comes up to you and says, will you lead a talk, a discussion or a short thought at your group? I don't know whether you're the kind of person who comes out in a cold sweat at that moment, or you're like, please no, I don't want to do that. But if you find yourself at some point saying yes, what we're going to do right now is talk through 3 key principles and 3 tips to help you do the very best that you can in trying to deliver that. So firstly, 3 quick principles. The first of those is to be clear. When you're putting together a thought, a talk, however long it may be, we need to make sure that the main message is clear. If you can't describe in one sentence the thrust of what you're trying to say, there's no way that your hearers will be able to give it in a sentence either. So work out what is the clear, most important thing that I am trying to communicate. You might spend some time praying and feel like this is the thing that I need to focus on. But making it a clear message all the way through is really important. Often we can go off on tangents all over the place as we prepare, but keep coming back to, is this clear? Now, of course, clear doesn't necessarily need to mean that it's simple or lacking in depth. It means it's got a clarity of focus. So I'd encourage you as you prepare to think, is this clear? And that might be simply having one big idea, which could be God heals, or it could be Jesus is alive. And it brings a clarity of focus to what you're trying to do, so everybody knows what the talk was all about. Secondly, we need to make it relatable. How can we help our audience to relate to what we're talking about so that it can make a difference for them and they understand how it relates to everyday life? What difference is knowing this information going to do to how I live my life tomorrow? And there's lots of ways we can think about how we help people to relate to it. That can be anything from stories and props and illustration and creative ideas around helping people to understand. But when we're preparing, we need to think, not only is it clear, but how are they going to be able to relate? So some of that's about knowing what age bracket that they're in, what they're interested in, and thinking, how can I make this message something that makes a difference for them and that they can relate to? And finally, on principles, is response. I don't know about you, but you've probably, just like me, sat through loads and loads of talks in your life, probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands. And again, like me, you probably can't remember very many of those. The ones that I can honestly say that I remember are those where I made a response to what that person was saying, where I perhaps encountered God as I stepped into a response moment. And that could be anything from those big moments when you came to the front to actually putting something into practice, like choosing to pray for 5 friends as a result of what I've heard, or to go and do something in a social action project, or something that led to a response. And I think the danger often when we do a talk is we spend all of our time, focus and attention on the content and not on what we want to see happen as a result. So when I'm preparing, I try and pray and ask, God, what's the clarity? What's the big idea behind this talk? And then what is it that you are wanting to come out of it in people's lives? So thinking through and being super creative, how do we make this memorable and something that people choose to enter into and respond with at the end of this time? And that can be anything from a mentoring session to a talk for 20 minutes. What is the response that I'm looking for? So those are your 3 principles. Make it clear, help people relate to it, and make sure that there's an opportunity to respond. Okay, those are your principles, but what about 3 quick top tips to think about when you're actually getting up there or you're sat around about to lead it? The first top tip I would give is make it interactive. Particularly with children and young people, explore discussion, ask questions, try and get them engaging with what you're doing, get them involved in an activity as a part of it so that they're fully engaged. Use props, use drama, use whatever you can to help bring it to life for them, particularly when you're looking at the Bible. How can they put themselves in the story? So make it as interactive as you possibly can. Secondly, we need to think about tone and volume. One of the challenges for all of us is when we get nervous, we either talk really quickly or really quietly, or we just go into monotone because our head is thinking about what we want to say and we're not thinking about how we say it. So making sure that we vary our tone and our volume as well, because we don't want to be shouting all the time, but we do want to project our voice. And at the same time, we can draw people in when we whisper, and it helps people start to listen a bit more. And so we need to think about how we use tone and volume to keep people with us. The truth is that we know from all the stats that our body language and our tone make a massive difference to how people receive our communication, way more than the words themselves. So just be thinking, and sometimes for me, what I do in my notes is I write the word pause in brackets or write little notes alongside what I'm going to say to help me to make sure that I'm trying to be as both interactive but also as helpful in the way that I'm communicating as possible. Thirdly, get feedback. Ask other people what they thought and get feedback so that you can learn and grow. We sometimes find ourselves getting defensive and particularly straight after you've delivered something, we're emotionally invested in it, and so we can get defensive when people give us some constructive feedback. So maybe wait 24 hours and say to people afterwards, can you just tell me what you thought? How could I improve? How could I have related this better for them? How could I have led that response in a better way? And get feedback, and don't be shy about that or embarrassed about that. We want to give these children and young people our very best. And so to do that, we need to be open with each other about how we deliver it and get that kind of feedback. But often we only ask for feedback after the event. Why not send someone your notes before you deliver it and say, does this make sense? And then get some feedback even before you deliver it to get the most out of the time that you've got. So let's be those kind of people that aren't precious about what we're trying to do, but we want to learn and to be like iron sharpening iron with one another, to give our very best to the children and young people we're serving in our setting. So 2 quick things just to think about as we finish. Thinking about those principles. Maybe it's one of those to think about for you is around response. What could response look like for you in your setting? Whether that's a quick God slot or a full-on Bible study discussion group. How could you bring in response in your local setting? And secondly, how could you create a sense of culture as your volunteer team around giving each other feedback and encouraging each other to improve in how you communicate with this generation? Thank you for watching, and all the best with all the talks, discussions, mentoring sessions and communication that you give, that God would really use you to impact these children and young people.